The night I almost bled out on a cracked sidewalk in Brooklyn, I could still hear the echo of my own laughter from just minutes earlier, sharp and bitter, bouncing off the graffiti-stained walls. My hands were shaking, though not from fiat, least that's what I told myself. Blood seeped warm and steady from the hole in my side, soaking through the fabric of my shirt, mixing with the dirt and the city's rain. I could smell gunpowder and cheap whiskey in the air, and a part of me wondered if this was the moment the streets would finally claim me. I had been living like a ghost long before that bullet ripped through my body. The tattoos across my skin weren't just ink. They were confessions written in code, a map of debts and broken promises. Some lines were etched for loyalty, others for betrayal, and most of them carried the weight of sins I didn't dare count anymore. That night, as the world tilted sideways and my breath came shallow, I saw those tattoos for what they really were, shackles I had chosen. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, but the only sound that mattered was the faint rhythm of my own heartbeat, slowing with each passing second. My crew had vanished into the shadows, leaving me sprawled on the concrete, like an afterthought. Funny how quick loyalty fades when the bullets start flying. I realized then how replaceable I was, just another name to carve on a wall, another cautionary tale whispered in back alleys. As I pressed my palm tighter against the wound, a memory rose, uninvited, the sound of my grandmother's voice, humming an old hymn when I was a boy. I hadn't thought of her in years, but in that moment, her melody slipped through the chaos like a faint light breaking into a locked room. My lips moved before I could stop them, whispering words I hadn't spoken in decades. God, if you can hear me. My vision blurred, colors smearing together like wet paint under the city's dim lights. I didn't know if I was dying or finally waking up. What I did know was that the streets of New York, with all their violence and allure, had just handed me a choice: surrender to the darkness that raised me, or reach for the fragile thread of mercy I had long abandoned. That night was the end of something and the beginning of something I couldn't yet name. The hospital lights were harsh, sterile, and unforgiving. I woke up to the beeping of machines, the weight of tubes in my arms, and a dull ache that reminded me I was still alive. The doctors said it was a miracle I had made it through the night. I didn't call it a miracle back then. I called it a mistake that left me breathing when I should have been gone. But deep down, where pride couldn't reach, I knew that prayer on the sidewalk had been heard. The weeks that followed were the slowest of my life. Every movement hurt, every breath carried the memory of that bullet. Visitors were few, no gang brothers came, no street allies showed up. The only face that appeared was an old pastor who claimed my grandmother once asked him to keep an eye on me. He prayed at my bedside, soft words that seemed to hang in the air even after he left. I wanted to push him away, but something inside me clung to those words, like a drowning man to driftwood. I had built my reputation on chaos, yet here I was, stripped of everything: money, respect, even strength. For the first time, silence surrounded me, and in that silence I saw myself clearer than ever, a man wasted by choices, branded by regret, but somehow still breathing. And in that fragile breath, I sensed there might still be time. Before we step deeper into my story, let me pause here. If this beginning has already caught your heart, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Write down your city and country, and tell me, do you believe a man like me could truly change? The first days in the hospital felt like punishment. Every sound, the hiss of oxygen, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, the monotone of the heart monitor, was a reminder that I wasn't free. I had lived years running the streets of New York, deciding where to go, who to trust, when to strike. But here, my body betrayed me. Even shifting in bed felt like dragging chains. The walls were white, the ceiling plain, yet to me it all felt like a prison carved out of brightness. Pain was my constant companion. Not just the physical ache from the bullet wound, but the emptiness that came when no one visited. My so-called brothers had disappeared. The women I thought cared for me never showed. Loneliness seeped into the cracks of my bravado. I told myself I didn't need anyone, but the truth was unbearable. I had been abandoned. The pastor came every other day. He was an older man, with thinning grey hair and kind eyes that seemed out of place in a city as brutal as ours. He never preached at me, never demanded anything. He just sat, asked how I was doing, sometimes even brought soup. And every time, before leaving, he'd rest his hand gently on my arm and whisper a short prayer. At first, I hated it. I wanted to shout at him, to tell him his words were wasted on me. But I didn't. Something about his calm unsettled me. Nights were the hardest. I'd close my eyes and see the gun flash, hear the scream, feel the burn of metal tearing through me. Sweat drenched my sheets, and I'd jolt awake with my chest pounding. One of those nights, as the city hummed faintly beyond the hospital windows, I muttered the same words I had on the sidewalk. God, if you can hear me. And then silence. I didn't know what I expected. Fire from heaven. A vision. All I got was the slow comfort of sleep, deeper than I'd known in years. In the mornings, I stared at my arms. The tattoos told stories I no longer wanted to remember. A dagger for my first fight. A skull for the first man I robbed. Crossed roses for a girl who once swore she'd wait for me, though she didn't. The ink was heavy with shame. Yet, one tattoo near my wrist caught my eye. A small, faded cross my grandmother had insisted on when I was 14. It was the only one I hadn't chosen for myself. For the first time, I wondered if she knew something I didn't. The pastor eventually brought me a small Bible. I pushed it aside, pretending I wasn't interested. But late one night, when sleep wouldn't come and the memories clawed at me, I reached for it. The pages smelled of old paper, like a library no one visited anymore. I opened at random and read words about light shining in darkness. I closed it quickly, uneasy, but the line stuck with me. Light in darkness. Was that even possible for someone like me? Each day my body healed, but inside I battled a storm. Part of me longed to return to the streets, to prove I wasn't weak, to reclaim the respect I had lost. Yet another part whispered that this bullet wasn't just an accident, it was a warning, maybe even an invitation. I didn't understand it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been spared for a reason. During one visit, the pastor looked at me and said, "You know, surviving that night was no mistake. God doesn't waste moments like these." His voice wasn't pushy. It was steady, like someone offering water in a desert. I wanted to argue, to laugh, to call him naive. But instead, I just stared at him and felt the first crack in my armor. Slowly, I started to pray, not long prayers, not eloquent ones, just whispers. Help me, don't let me go. Show me something. I didn't know if anyone was listening, but the prayers eased the weight on my chest. It was like breathing through smoke and finally finding a pocket of fresh air. Weeks turned into months, and the day came when the doctors said I could leave. I should have felt free, but instead I felt lost. The streets no longer looked like home, but neither did the church. I stood on the hospital steps, weak and uncertain, staring at the city that had once owned me, and for the first time, I admitted to myself, I had no idea where I belonged. The first breath of city air outside the hospital was heavier than I remembered. It carried the scent of fried food from corner stands, exhaust fumes, and the faint bitterness of rain on hot pavement. My body was still frail, the scar on my side pulling with every step. But what weighed more than the wound was the silence of having nowhere to go. The crew I once bled for had erased me from their world, and family wasn't exactly waiting with open arms. My old apartment felt like walking into a crime scene. Dust covered the furniture, the fridge stank of rot, and the walls echoed with memories I wanted to forget. I found my gun still hidden under the mattress, cold and familiar. For a long moment, I held it in my hand, the weight of it pressing old instincts back into my bones. But then I caught sight of the Bible the pastor had given me, lying on the nightstand where I had left it. Two worlds stared at me in that room, the one that had nearly killed me, and the one I didn't yet understand. By the second week home, the streets found me. An old friend, Ricky, showed up unannounced. His grin was wide, his arms heavy with chains, the smell of weed and liquor clinging to him like armor. "Man, you're a legend out here. They thought you were gone, but look at you, still breathing. Come back, bro, we could use you." His words dripped with temptation. For a split second I felt the rush again, the thrill of power, the familiarity of belonging. But then Ricky pulled out a bag of pills, tossing it casually onto the table. Quick money, no risk. My stomach turned. I remembered the hospital nights, the prayers whispered into darkness, the peace I had tasted when I least deserved it. I pushed the bag back toward him and said, "Not anymore." Ricky laughed, loud and mocking, but there was confusion in his eyes. "You clean, don't make me laugh." And just like that, the bridge burned. Nights grew lonelier. I sat by the window, staring at the lights of Brooklyn, wondering if I'd made the right choice. I felt like a ghost in my own city, disdained for the world of church, too changed for the streets. One evening, desperate for something different, I remembered the pastor's invitation. He had scribbled an address on a piece of paper weeks before. With nothing left to lose, I decided to go. The church wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a grand cathedral with stained glass. It was a small Presbyterian building, brick walls, and a wooden cross above the door. Inside, the pews creaked, and the air smelled faintly of old hymnals. People were dressed simple, not flashy. Nobody stared at my tattoos with fear. Nobody asked where I had been. They just smiled honest, gentle smiles that felt like they came from another world. The first service I attended, I sat in the back, trying to be invisible. The songs began, soft at first, then building as voices joined together. It wasn't polished, but it was raw, alive. I found myself watching the worship leader, a young man with a guitar, eyes closed, singing like every word mattered. Something stirred in me. Music had always been part of my world, loud beats on street corners, blasting rap in cars. But this was different. This music felt clean, like it was reaching into the cracks of my soul. When the pastor preached, I expected judgment. Instead, he spoke about grace, the kind that runs toward you even when you've been running the other way. I clenched my fists, trying not to show how his words hit me. Grace, for me, it sounded impossible, but also like the one thing I desperately wanted. After the service, an older woman approached me. Her hands were wrinkled, her eyes bright. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice trembling with kindness. She didn't ask about my scars or the ink across my skin. She just welcomed me as if I had always belonged. That small moment broke something in me more than any bullet ever had. Walking home that night, I felt the city differently. The noise was the same, the chaos unchanged, but inside me there was a flicker, a tiny flame refusing to go out. I didn't know what God had planned, didn't know if I could ever be more than the gangster the streets named me, but for the first time, I wanted to find out. The weeks after that first visit to the church were uneasy, like learning to walk on a new set of legs. I went back, though not every Sunday. Some days I felt pulled there by a strange magnet. Other days I avoided it, afraid of what I might find in myself. The pastor always greeted me with a handshake, no questions asked. He didn't pressure me, didn't dig into my story. That quiet respect gave me room to breathe. Music was what kept me coming back. The songs were simple acoustic guitars, a piano, sometimes a drum, but the words had weight, like confessions set to melody. I'd sit in the back pew, my head low, and let the voices wash over me. More than once, I felt tears sting my eyes, though I refused to let them fall. I told myself it was just the rhythm, just the nostalgia of hearing voices lifted in unison. But deep down, I knew it was something greater. One evening, after the service, the worship leader approached me. His name was Daniel. He was younger than me, maybe 25, but his presence carried a calm strength. "You've got a musical ear," he said. "I saw you mouthing the words. Ever thought about singing?" I laughed bitterly. "Man, I don't belong up there. You don't know what these hands have done." He didn't flinch. "Doesn't matter what they've done. What matters is what they can do now." His words stuck with me all night. At home, I dug out an old guitar I had stolen years ago and never touched. The strings were rusted, the wood scarred, much like me. I tuned it clumsily, my fingers stiff from disuse, but the sound it gave was honest. For hours I strummed, fumbling through chords, letting the vibration fill the silence of my apartment. Something about it felt like healing. Yet, the ghosts of my past weren't silent. Old acquaintances knocked on my door, some with promises, others with threats. One night I almost gave in. Ricky came back, this time not with pills, but with kashik rolls of it. "Just one run," he said. "Quick, easy, you'll be back on top." I stared at the money, the old hunger gnawing at me. My hands trembled, not with desire, but with fear of who I'd become again if I said yes. Instead of answering Ricky, I picked up my guitar and strummed off-key and rough. The sound filled the room, awkward and broken, but it pushed his voice into the background. Ricky shook his head. "You've lost it, bro." He left with a laugh, but for once, I didn't feel like I had lost. I felt like I had chosen. At the next service, Daniel invited me to stay after. The worship team gathered in a small room, tuning instruments, laughing, sharing snacks. I felt like an intruder, my tattoos screaming louder than my voice ever could. But then someone handed me a lyric sheet and said, "Sing with us." I hesitated, my throat dry, but when the first chord played, my voice stumbled out. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a gangster trying to blend in. I felt like a man trying to be reborn. Later that night, walking home, I whispered a prayer without realizing it. Thank you for not giving up on me. The city around me buzzed with its usual chaos, but inside I felt something shift. It wasn't peace, not fully. It was a war, one side pulling me back to the streets, the other pushing me toward light. But I realized then that battles can also be sacred, because they mean you're still fighting. The more I practiced with the team, the more I felt my voice grow, not just in strength, but in truth. Singing wasn't about performance, it was about honesty. Every lyric was a confession, every note a piece of surrender. I sang not to be heard, but to let go of what I had carried for too long. Still, I wrestled with shame. After practice I'd walk past a mirror and catch my reflection, the tattoos, the scars, the haunted eyes. Could people really look past all that? Could God? Yet, when I stood with the team on Sunday mornings, guitar in hand, voices rising together, I caught glimpses of grace, not loud, not flashy, just steady, and I began to believe, little by little, that maybe grace was strong enough for even me. By the time I was leading a song during Sunday worship, I knew my life had crossed a line I could never step back from. Standing on that stage, guitar strapped over my shoulder, I saw faces lifted, voices raised, and I felt the presence of something I had chased in all the wrong places, belonging. But the streets don't let go that easily, and soon enough, they came knocking again. It started with whispered. People I once knew passed by the church, smirking, muttering threats, traitor, sellout. I shrugged them off at first, but the tension grew. One night, as I left rehearsal, I found the tires of my car slashed. A message scrawled in red across the hood. "You don't walk away." My stomach twisted. The old fear crept back, cold and familiar. I didn't tell the pastor. I didn't want to bring trouble to the church. Instead, I tried to carry it alone, but it gnawed at me. Every shadow looked like danger. Every stranger's glance felt like a warning. I slept with the old gun still hidden under my mattress, ashamed of even touching it, but terrified of not having it. The breaking point came one Friday night. I was walking home when Ricky and two others cornered me in an alley. The look in their eyes was darker than anything I remembered. Ricky's voice dripped with venom. "You think you're better than us now? Singing your little songs, you don't just walk away, man. Blood in, blood out." He shoved me against the wall, the cold brick pressing into my scar. My fists clenched. The old me screamed to fight back, to reclaim respect with violence. For a moment, I saw myself pulling the gun, saw the headlines, saw everything undone in a heartbeat. But then, clearer than the rage, came the sound of that hymn my grandmother once hummed, rising uninvited from the depths of memory. "The Lord is my light." The words echoed in my mind like a shield. I whispered, "I'm done." My voice shook, but I forced it out again, louder. "I'm done with this life." Ricky's fist cracked against my jaw, the taste of iron filling my mouth. The others laughed, shoving me down, but I didn't swing back. For the first time, I chose not to. Lying on the cold pavement, pain radiating through my ribs, I prayed silently, "God, if you're with me, don't let me give in." A car pulled into the alley, headlights blinding us. The men scattered, cursing, disappearing into the night. I staggered to my feet, bleeding but alive. It wasn't chance. I knew it. Something or someone had intervened. I walked home limping, my body bruised, but my soul strangely steady. The gun stayed under the mattress after that night. I never touched it again. The next Sunday, I shared the truth with the pastor. My voice trembled as I told him about the threats, about Ricky, about the fight I almost chose. He listened quietly, then placed his hand on my shoulder. "You passed the test," he said. "Not because you were strong, but because you surrendered." His words sank deep. Strength had never saved me, but surrender, that was new. From then on, worship was different. When I sang, it wasn't just music, it was defiance. Every lyric was a declaration that I no longer belonged to the streets. People began to notice. After services, men and women with haunted eyes approached me. Some were addicts, some ex-cons, some just broken by life. "If God can change you," they'd say, "maybe he can change me." And for the first time, I believed it too. Still, the threats didn't vanish. I knew danger was always near, but I also knew I wasn't alone anymore. Each time I stepped onto that stage, guitar in hand, scars and tattoos in plain view, I felt like I was holding a banner, not of victory, not of perfection, but of grace. And grace, I was learning, is stronger than fear. By the time I was leading a song during Sunday worship, I knew my life had crossed a line I could never step back from. Standing on that stage, guitar strapped over my shoulder, I saw faces lifted, voices raised, and I felt the presence of something I had chased in all the wrong places, belonging. But the streets don't let go that easily, and soon enough, they came knocking again. It started with whispered. People I once knew passed by the church, smirking, muttering threats, traitor, sellout. I shrugged them off at first, but the tension grew. One night, as I left rehearsal, I found the tires of my car slashed. A message scrawled in red across the hood. You don't walk away. My stomach twisted. The old fear crept back, cold and familiar. I didn't tell the pastor. I didn't want to bring trouble to the church. Instead, I tried to carry it alone, but it gnawed at me. Every shadow looked like danger. Every stranger's glance felt like a warning. I slept with the old gun still hidden under my mattress, ashamed of even touching it, but terrified of not having it. The breaking point came one Friday night. I was walking home when Ricky and two others cornered me in an alley. The look in their eyes was darker than anything I remembered. Ricky's voice dripped with venom. You think you're better than us now, singing your little songs. You don't just walk away, man. Blood in, blood out. He shoved me against the wall, the cold brick pressing into my scar. My fists clenched. The old me screamed to fight back, to reclaim respect with violence. For a moment, I saw myself pulling the gun, saw the headlines, saw everything undone in a heartbeat. But then, clearer than the rage, came the sound of that hymn my grandmother once hummed, rising uninvited from the depths of memory. The Lord is my light. The words echoed in my mind like a shield. I whispered, I'm done. My voice shook, but I forced it out again, louder. I'm done with this life. Ricky's fist cracked against my jaw, the taste of iron filling my mouth. The others laughed, shoving me down, but I didn't swing back. For the first time, I chose not to. Lying on the cold pavement, pain radiating through my ribs, I prayed silently. God, if you're with me, don't let me give in. A car pulled into the alley, headlights blinding us. The men scattered, cursing, disappearing into the night. I staggered to my feet, bleeding but alive. It wasn't chance. I knew it. Something or someone had intervened. I walked home limping, my body bruised, but my soul strangely steady. The gun stayed under the mattress after that night. I never touched it again. The next Sunday, I shared the truth with the pastor. My voice trembled as I told him about the threats, about Ricky, about the fight I almost chose. He listened quietly, then placed his hand on my shoulder. You passed the test, he said. Not because you were strong, but because you surrendered. His words sank deep. Strength had never saved me, but surrender, that was new. From then on, worship was different. When I sang, it wasn't just music, it was defiance. Every lyric was a declaration that I no longer belonged to the streets. People began to notice. After services, men and women with haunted eyes approached me. Some were addicts, some ex-cons, some just broken by life. If God can change you, they'd say, maybe he can change me. And for the first time, I believed it too. Still, the threats didn't vanish. I knew danger was always near, but I also knew I wasn't alone anymore. Each time I stepped onto that stage, guitar in hand, scars and tattoos in plain view, I felt like I was holding a banner, not of victory, not of perfection, but of grace. And grace, I was learning, is stronger than fear. I often think back to that night on the sidewalk, the taste of blood in my mouth, the echo of sirens fading into darkness. By every law of the streets, I should have died there. But what the streets meant for my ending, God used as a doorway. That bullet wasn't just metal, it was the key that unlocked my second life. The scars are still with me, etched in skin and memory, but they no longer speak of shame. They speak of survival, of grace that found me in the gutter and refused to let go. When I stand before a crowd now, guitar in hand, I don't sing as a saint. I sing as a man who knows what it feels like to be lost, and who has tasted the sweetness of being found. If my story proves anything, it's this. No life is too far gone. No darkness too deep, no heart too broken for redemption. The streets gave me wounds, but faith gave me purpose. And today, as a minister and missionary, I walk not as the man I was, but as the man I was always meant to be, a living testimony that even the hardest past can be rewritten in the ink of grace.